Everybody, as we gather today to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day, it's worth remembering that by June 1944, our country had been at war for more than 4.5 years. In that time, we stood alone in 1940. The war became truly global with Japan's attacks on Pearl Harbor and across Asia in 1941, which brought the USA into the war. We had suffered a succession of reverses from Dunkirk, where 2 battalions of the Worcestershire Regiment were involved, to the fall of Singapore. However, the tide began to turn with the Battle of El Alamein in North Africa in 1942. In particular, the Allies began to plan for the liberation of Europe, which they knew would be a massive task, necessitating the creation and training of very large forces with all the necessary support. Together with the hugely complex task of building the ships and infrastructure to enable a combined forces seaborne assault against a prepared enemy, possibly the most complex and fraught operation of all warfare. Planned for the 5th of June, the operation was delayed by weather for 24 hours. The initial nighttime bombing was followed by an airborne assault with many men of Worcestershire involved as part of the volunteer paratroopers, among them being Major General Richard Gale of the Worcestershire Regiment, who was commanding the 6th Airborne Division. The first gunner battery into action to support them was our own Worcestershire Yeomanry, who'd landed in gliders. They were rapidly followed by a massive seaborne assault, supported by huge swathes of naval gunnery. On that first day alone, 154,000 American, British, Canadian and other Allied soldiers landed on 5 beats. That figure is 1.5 times the size of Worcester today, of whom more than 10,000 became casualties and 4,414 were confirmed killed in action on that first day. The liberation of Europe from Nazi tyranny had started, but the Battle of Normandy was to be a long, hard fight as the Germans tried to eject the Allies, and they in turn built up their forces and expanded the initial bridgeheads gained on D-Day. 1st Battalion, the Worcestershire Regiment, were part of those follow-on forces and were due to land on the 17th of June. But, again, British weather intervened as storms swept up the Channel. Their shipping had to take sanctuary behind the Isle of Wight. Eventually, they landed at Montfleury on Gold Beach on the 22nd of June 1944 and were launched straight into combat. The Allies finally broke out of Normandy in mid-August 1944, initially advancing rapidly across France. 1st Worcesters led the assault river crossing at the River Seine, west of Paris, at Vernon in late August. The advance across Belgium and in the Netherlands involved much heavy fighting, including trying to reach the paratroopers at Arnhem before 1st Worcesters crossed the Rhine and entered Germany in early 45. By Victory in Europe Day in May 1945, they'd reached as far as Bremen. In June 1944, 1st Battalion of the Worcestershire Regiment embarked for Normandy at a strength of 36 officers and 800 men. By Victory in Europe Day, only 11 months later, they had lost 264 killed in action and sustained a further 1,177 wounded and missing. As we remember D-Day, we must not forget the parts that others played. One often overlooked aspect of D-Day was the comprehensive deception operations to make Hitler think the invasion was coming across the Pas-de-Calais or other parts of Europe. 10th Battalion, the Worcestershire Regiment, were involved in creating 250 dummy landing craft in the estuaries of Kent. On the 6th of June 1944, 2nd and 7th Battalions of the Worcestershire Regiment were heavily engaged in the Battle of Imphal and the relief of Kohima, which turned the tide of Japanese invasions. Subsequently, they were intimately involved in the advance down Burma and were still engaged when the Japanese surrender was precipitated by the dropping of the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And VJ Day happened in August 1945, 3 months after Europe. D-Day is part of a wider story, and that is why every November we will all gather together again here and in the cathedral to remember the 1,013 men of the Worcestershire Regiment who laid down their lives during the whole of World War II.